fuck are accountants going to do now? Because that can do GST returns, it can do reconciliation. Like, what's the actual benefit of having an accountant if every small business can now do it themselves?
It seems like a very hard thing to sell. You can sell it. It's just not an irresistible offer. You know, like, so you have these extremes, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. You have the custom builds that people want and they pay a high dollar that funds your business until you get the next one. And then you got the website builder people where they just want to pay the bare minimum and they're annoying as fuck. Or they could just get a template and it's not very secure, but they don't really get that. And they're kind of in a tough situation. So how do you take on a salesperson to train them to sell a $16,000 thing to someone that you're like, hey, you might get results in 6 months to a year with SEO or whatever? Like, how are you approaching it? You know what I mean?
Japanese culture and in the way that and I know very little about it, but it's like the way that they look at work and so like sitting on one task and becoming an expert at that thing and like, sharpening knives, like, you know what I mean, whatever it is, but like you're really good at sharpening knives.
All right, we'll kick into it.
Yeah, sweet, let's do it.
Yeah, you must surf or something.
I do surf.
Meditate as well?
Yeah, I do meditate.
Yeah, I'm piecing the puzzle.
Okay, yeah,
cool. All right, well, we're starting, and I think I sort of see it like climbing a mountain. So people are going to come on a journey for 45 minutes to an hour, and they got to work out who the guide is. So you're going to be our guide this evening. So who is the guide? What does the guide do?
Well, the guide, what does the guide do? So the guide, for a living, the guide designs and builds websites. But I do other things in my spare time as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, like you said, I like surfing.
Longboard or short?
Both, but mainly shortboarding. And that's what actually brought me to New Zealand in the first place.
Oh.
So that was 13 years ago now.
From
San Francisco, actually. A place called Marin County, just north of San Francisco, about 20 minutes.
So you got tired of surfing the web, so you thought you'd see some nature.
Yeah. I fell into my first job in software, and that was sort of, I actually studied agricultural business. My parents own a small meat company.
Meat company?
Meat, yeah. So sell.
You can offal cut? Like, can you like deal to some like animals? Or?
Not at all. Yeah. I'm the most impractical person in New Zealand, I'm pretty sure. But they're distributors. So they, there's farmers throughout the country, and my dad was all about sourcing the best quality meat for restaurants in San Francisco. And so we had the luxury of eating really good, meat growing up, and I never even realized how lucky I was.
Grass-fed?
Yeah, fully. And they call it like range-fed. It's like a term that they use over there, but it's, we're talking like there's the feedlot scenario, and then there's like, there's organics, and there's lots of different, I think, ways that people describe the meat there, and for the consumer, like it's a different ball game because we have so many different ways to screw people over there, you know, in terms of what is it really.
Can you like unpack that? Because I don't know, you can't talk about eggs as such. Maybe you do know about them, but like when you look at the name, you're like, this isn't actually what they're saying, but it sounds natural.
Yeah, well, some Kiwis pulled me up on it because it's like, what is range fed, and I was like, oh, that's just what we call it. But then I realized that that's probably unique to that part of the world.
Everything's grass-fed in New Zealand.
Exactly. Like there's that sort of thing that happens, and until you move here, you don't know that. And so because we used to drive from San Francisco to LA, and people who've done that drive on the 5 know that there's a stench that comes through the car, like as you're leaving the Bay Area, and that's actually the feedlot that sits not like within. You can see it from the road. You can barely see it from the distance, but it's actually like. Must be millions of animals sitting in there, all on top of each other, just like
Jesus.
And they obviously shit where they eat, and then the antibiotics, and just to keep those animals alive, and then we consume that. So luckily, growing up, I never had to. I didn't even know. I wanted my dad to be a firefighter or like a policeman when he'd come into school, and he was like, "What does your dad do?" But he was like, sells meat, and I was like, "Ah!" But then I realized that that's actually, it's also what he believes in, right? So that's pretty cool. And I don't know, that was my childhood, so that was sort of what I studied, and I thought that I was going to come back and
you turned vegan since?
I haven't. No,
You're
I
not a
eat,
true surfer.
I
bro.
probably eat, yeah, exactly. I did actually go off meat when I was like 10 because I think we like overloaded on chicken and the smell of it was like putting me off. But I've always been into it. I'm actually not overly. I don't think I'm like especially into it. But my dad, I think he only eats red meat and drinks red wine. So it's like, you know, he's
Does he
into
look
it.
healthy?
He does. I think it's his Ugandan genes, though. I don't
Ugandan genes, solid genes, brother.
Exactly.
They know some weak genes.
Yeah, there's nothing weak about that. But
Have you been to Uganda?
I have, yeah, I have once.
I
Actually.
honestly, this is ignorant as fuck. I've heard it. I don't know where it is. What
I
is
don't
it?
think it's
Tell us.
ignorant. There's quite a few countries in Africa, or there's quite a few places in Africa. But
I may know 3.
yeah.
Unless I'm there, I still don't know where it is. Unless I Google it.
Lake Victoria on the east, on the east side. So like equator, and then basically it's one of the most eastern countries, if I'm correct.
If you don't know, I'm fucked.
And it sits. Well, yeah, I know.
You've been there.
I know sort of where it is.
Vague.
Yeah. Well,
Can you surf there?
I think it borders Kenya as well. So it's like East Africa, sitting over Lake Victoria on the equator. You've got Congo in the south, southwest, and yeah, it's basically like they call it the Pearl of Africa because it's extremely fertile. The soil's like it's like this red clay, and yeah, it's a tropical feeling place, but it's I haven't actually spent heaps of time there because when my dad Idi Amin was a dictator back in the 70s, and our parents would remember, obviously mine would as well, but my dad fled from that regime like
Jesus.
During that time, and he never looked back, so we never really had a connection to Uganda because he there's actually so many Ugandans in America that we would go to like Ugandan conventions in different states every year, and there'd be like hundreds, if not thousands, of Ugandans hanging out.
Wow. Is it like a story Dad shared, or is it too hectic?
A story?
Like if there's a dictator doing dictator things. Like I have something in the back of my mind, like millions of people were slaughtered because they weren't the right tribe. Or am I just not even, this is someone completely different?
Yeah.
I think it's someone completely different.
Yeah, I know there's like militias and stuff. I don't know like it's a typical dictator story. But yeah, I think what I know about it was specific to like the family was that his dad basically told him he was studying in the UK at the time, and his dad was like, "Don't come home; it's not safe." And so that was like, it was a risk to basically come home from. It would be like us being at university and being like, "Don't come home," because his militia is burning farms and creating havoc in the region, and they're working their way through Uganda and killing people, like you said, and it's just not a safe place to be. So yeah, that was basically his way of, he had to move to somewhere, I guess, and he decided to come to the States, and he was in an age where he was lucky he could get a visa and everything worked out for him. And
was Mum the green card, or how did he?
Nah, his dad, my grandfather, was the ambassador of Uganda to the United Nations. So
fancy. Yeah,
so that meant, I'm assuming, he still hasn't told me too many details, but I'm assuming that gets you like your green card. You're like, you can go anywhere basically.
Special privileges.
Yeah, you would. And so that was, but then they didn't have a great relationship, and so I met my grandfather when I was like a baby, but I have no recollection of him. Because they never, so like that Ugandan side was sort of, growing up it was weird. I think the takeaway for me was that growing up in America in like a relatively, affluent white community, being half, Ugandan
and not related
and not really understanding it is quite confusing.
Yeah. Were you cooked? Were you bullied? Or
Nah, not bullied more than anybody else.
Like you weren't like outnumbered and shit.
No, Marin County was really open, and probably the best place that you could grow up, like in terms of how liberal and open it was. And so yeah, I had the typical. You have like one bully, like everyone has one guy or a girl that bullied them, like. And so I definitely had one. I think he was Asian, ironically.
Okay.
So I was like, bro, we should stick together.
Yeah, minorities unite.
Yeah, but we didn't have that sort of organizational skills at that time. But it was Yeah, it was fine. Like the upbringing is great, and I still have a lot of those people that I met when I was in grade school. I have as close friends today, like through high school, university, and some of them are doing incredible stuff. You know, so it's pretty cool. And every time I go home, which is usually about once a year, I reconnect with them, and we're
traumaless life. It must be good.
Well, I wouldn't say traumaless. I just say
just that component.
It didn't follow the typical. Well, I don't know if there is a typical path. You know, it just sort of. I think one thing that also resonates with me was that my dad said, "Never compromise your integrity," and so that was like.
You're better than me. I've compromised a lot.
Well, I have too. Yeah, I just it's not that I haven't done it. Yeah. I'm always like, what did he say? Like, yeah. I still, you know, it happens all the time, right? But it's
less though.
Yeah, and I think you also just walk around and realize that it's taken me a long time to realize it. But you know, the way you look and the way you present yourself, and you don't have to try and. You know, this is kind of a good segue into business, but it's like you don't have to try and, you know, be somebody that you're not. And I definitely struggled with that as I was building my business and, you know, understanding where I fit into the equation. And that's where I'd say being different, looking different has, you know, been difficult because you sort of maybe that has led me to never really like lean into what I actually look like, you know, I'm a bit of a chameleon in that sense.
Gotcha.
Like it's nice that I can live in New Zealand or, you know, live in Auckland, then move to Wanaka and feel comfortable in these environments where there's no one that looks like me or talks like me or whatever. But then there's probably something there that makes it, you know, I've followed other paths. I feel like, you know, I was like, I gotta, you know, work in the city and look this way and act this way if I can't have dreadlocks or whatever. But you know, the reality is that dreads are actually just when I don't comb my hair. So it's not like a look for me. It's actually just a
convenience.
It's like an outcome of it's convenience. It's
I'm not
untidiness.
Doing well. Yeah. If you see my hair like this, I'm fucking struggling.
Yeah,
like,
but for other people, it's like I have to wax this every day. You know, like and I have to create that look. You know, and so but the look actually doesn't mean anything other than the look, you know, the look doesn't mean that I'm a Rastafari or
you surf, and I thought you were going to be vegan,
or I rip the bongs, you know, like it doesn't mean any of that. And I haven't really, I'm still unpacking that. I think that'll be a lifelong thing, but I definitely feel more comfortable now just being, you know, it's taken me a while, but I do feel more comfortable just in my own skin, which is what you'd want for anybody, you know,
hopefully,
regardless of what you look like. Yeah.
It's not fun. Well, so yeah, I imagine, you know, poor guests come on the show and like, you're going to talk all about business and marketing, building websites, where I'm like, what led to you wearing a mask the majority of your life, you know? So, like, up to you. This is full on.
Wherever you want to go, mate.
Okay, you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, go on.
So, what do you think caused your need to be a chameleon?
Yeah, well, it wasn't a need to be a chameleon. I think it was a response. It was just probably a behavioral response to...
who made you feel like you don't belong?
Yeah, I'd say I looked at it from the other end of the perspective where I was like, I belong everywhere, you know, but in order to belong, I have to be, right? So if you want to be, say like you want to be a surfer, or let's make it more about business. Like, let's say you want to be an entrepreneur. Well, what do entrepreneurs, especially in like tech, right? Like I'm just thinking of like the persona of a tech entrepreneur. We all know it. T-shirt. The name, the brand of the tech the startup that you have, you know, your team around you, and you know, and obviously relaxed style. So they're wearing jandals, they're wearing, you know, they're cruising around, and they just look. It's like the anti-corporate look, right? Like that's an example of a persona that we see in business and within entrepreneurship. And so if I was to follow that path, you know, that's a lot of people look like that for a reason, because they think that that's like the dress code. So every and lawyers have a certain way of looking, and, you know, it goes on and on. So I think that's just natural, right? Is like we think that we sort of, and at least in the way that I was thinking, is like you lean into some of those stereotypes and you adopt them because it's like, that's what everyone else is doing. And I'd say, for me, I think maybe I leaned into them because I could, you know what I mean? Like I didn't think that my point of difference is, even though externally it's probably obvious, but like I actually never considered. Yeah.
It's crazy. I was like, as soon as you started talking, I was like, wait, we're not the same person.
Yeah. Well, we literally, like, the way that I perceive myself is that I look the same as everyone. You know, like,
Yeah.
the way I look out, I'm like, I just look like everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, but then you look in the mirror sometimes and you realize you're like, shit, you know. But then I guess, yeah, that's it, there's positives and, you know, there's positives to that and there's also negatives to that. But I've never really had a problem, I guess, being slotted in anywhere because I've never really thought twice about it. But I can lean into like whatever it needed to be, you know?
So just to recap what you said. So essentially, Granddad wasn't that nice because Dad didn't get along with Granddad. You weren't bullied apart from that one guy. You were the only Ugandan in your
New Zealand.
New Zealand. Probably the first I've met. I'll be honest.
I would like to claim that. If anyone else, actually, no, I know another one, so I can't claim that. And he's
Top
in
two.
Auckland. Yeah,
you're in top 2.
I'm the only one that's been on this podcast, so I'll tell you that.
Yeah, fuck him.
Yeah,
never again. If I see, I'm sorry, brother. There's only room
there's
for
only one. Yeah,
yeah. We got to band together like the Asian guy. I'm the Asian guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I always find it interesting, like, so often, like, if someone feels like they need to conform and can't necessarily voice either their emotions or fears or to be own who they are and lean into it, often it's because someone told them to conform and not make a fuss and that their voice isn't valued, you know. And, you know, you could have a well-meaning father and mother and you might not have any trauma, but they might actually be either not emotionally expressive or supportive or nothing you do is good enough. You know what I mean? That's where I was like, okay, fucking cookie cutter, perfect person. You know, what do you think is yours? That's the biggest belief system holding you back right now.
My belief system holding me back. Well, I think I'm still on that journey of being able to just lean into to understand who I am, you know, and that's part of probably what was tricky is I see a lot of that, the rhetoric around understanding who you are is like going back into your history and tapping into, like, you know, your ancestors or your family history and your sense of place. And I think the trickiest part is not ever having like a really good understanding of the Ugandan heritage and the journey that my family's been on that side because of the falling out that my dad had with certain individuals within the family. Like, that's been challenging because if you can't really explore that, you know, there's a sense of like you're disconnected in a way. And there's also I see a lot of good in these things because it's like, it's also, I kind of move forward, right? So I like come to New Zealand, I'm like, well, this is now me, you know, this is my place. And I'm able to go in and not really like think about the past too much and be sort of wondering what it could be. But I think I have to revisit that still. Like, I think in order to move forward fully, I have to actually go to Uganda and experience it. Like, I have to deeply immerse myself in that experience, and it's waiting for me.
And the family too, huh?
Yeah, totally. Like, I think you just have to. And so, in like, at least in my, you know, in the context of my struggles and my challenges, and I think that'll unlock a lot of understanding. And even for that short period that I actually went for a funeral, and I was with my dad. Just from the 3 weeks of being there or whatever it was, I learned so much more about how he, like, my upbringing and how he was parenting and like why certain things happened just from seeing him in his native land, you know, and around his people. Like, it was wild. I was like, oh my God, this explains so much about like my upbringing, that it was like a crash course in, you know, in like behavioral stuff. And
interesting.
So,
you say a lot without alluding to it because you might not want to get anyone in trouble.
Oh, there's just rabbit holes, you know. Like,
yeah,
I don't think. You probably don't want to. You know, I could go down any path, but like, it's pick and choose. So I think, but that's sort of, you know, that's the long and the short of it, I suppose, is like reconnecting with the past to be able to be confident in who you are moving forward, like in the future, and that's sort of, I think, a journey that I'm definitely still on, at least. Because wherever I move or wherever I go, I still feel that. I'm like, yeah, but what about, you know, like, what about who you are? Like, what about the Ugandan side of who you are? Like, you need to explore that. So it's there. It's waiting for me.
Well, I'll give you a rest now.
Oh, yeah, nice.
I'm just trying to, because you know what I'm saying? It's like, you're like, you know, when people tell me, I try not to let the past define me and invest too much in it, it's usually the past is quite, you know, heavy. But they've used that as a means to carry on and not vest into it too much. And then you also talked about your father, like the way he treated you made a lot more sense in that country. So we won't have to go on it. Just for me, I'm just like,
yeah. Well,
2
there's
plus
just
2 equals 7.
yeah. There's just you know, I think if you tap into the
Was he too disciplined?
no, it's just when you have a and maybe it stands out because if you think about it like you live, it was kind of like what I was alluding to, like growing up in Marin County, you're growing up in this like affluent, you know, progressive Californian, like extremely progressive, right? Like there's things that I saw there 10 years ago that I'm just now seeing in New Zealand, you know, like socially. And so in like the, you know, things that are
Woke.
yeah, exactly. Like it's extremely, that's the term, like that's what we use now. And it's like, it's extremely woke. And some of it's like, obviously it can go both ways, right? But the reality is that they got there sooner, you know, like a lot of things were happening there that I'm like, wow, I'm surprised we're just seeing that here. But that's the way that it works. It's a smaller place and we're at the bottom of the world hanging out and, you know, things take time and the internet's expedited that, but it's still,
what is that difference, do you think? What, without being a journalist and getting cancelled?
Yeah.
How are we behind?
Well, it used to be fashion, but yeah, the internet's fixed that. So that's, you know, like it used to be media, right? Remember, like I came with an iPhone to this country and like I was definitely like one of the only people I knew with an iPhone here, and you guys were still texting using your fingers, making like you had another language, and I had never seen that before. And everyone's like, "Oh, it's so you can save money on a text." And I was like, "That's borderline like that's gnarly, dude." Yeah. I was like, "That's like third world right there."
Yeah, but Nokia though, have you used it?
Yeah, of course, but you know,
yeah, but that's like that
5
was
years before I got here. Yeah. So like those are examples of things that you know that actually, you know, came later, right? Yeah. And so there's other things like, and it could have been like we had in high school, we had a gay straight alliance. It was like very outwardly, you know, like it was like, we're here, this is what it's about. And you know, it was out there, and like it was a time when a lot of people didn't understand what that even meant, you know, myself included. So like, but being educated on that as a young high school kid, like it helps because you go other places in the world and then fast forward to now and it's like it's commonplace, right? It's like things that you used to be able to say or do are no longer acceptable, and it's a good thing, you know, like there's good parts of that and there's probably bad, but ultimately I think progress is, you know, like being able to be more open to more different types of people is a good thing generally. So yeah, so there's
So our gay straight alliance needs some work.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
We use the F word too much. I won't say it.
Well, yeah.
Well, I would say it, but
I probably swear
not that F word. The one that ends with the T. It sounds like sticks.
Yeah,
What doesn't sound like sticks? It translates to sticks.
Yeah, sure. But like the like bringing it back to what you asked me. Yeah. It was like you know, I think having a Ugandan father that was raising us with the things that
religion.
Well, yeah, he wasn't actually. He wasn't religious. I think
because Uganda has like they banned gay. Is that Uganda?
They did, yeah.
Yeah, they banned gay people.
Yeah.
They don't exist now.
Well, yeah, there's something there. I can't remember exactly how that works, but yeah, you can. I think you can go to prison if you know. You know, it's whatever. There's definitely oppressive signaling coming from like institutions within Uganda for sure, and that like doesn't surprise me because there's a lot of crazy shit that happens in Africa, but like and everywhere in the world. But, yeah. But
America's crazy, but they just don't admit it.
America's crazy, bro. Like looking at it from the outside, especially living here now, you're like, whoa.
Private and military industrial complex. We're going to unpack that.
Wild, yeah. Gun control, gun laws, like you name it. But
how many controversial topics can we hit? So you had the Ugandan dad, and I took you into a dangerous territory, and I'll come back to websites.
Okay, yeah.
Eventually, but
yeah.
Dad was like this, and the progressive society was like this, and then you came to New Zealand, you're like, You're like my dad 10 years ago. You guys.
Well, no, I'm like, this is neither like my dad nor like the progressive societies. And I was like, these Kiwis are buzzy.
Yeah, so buzzy.
I was like,
bro.
you guys you're like barefoot in supermarkets.
Yeah.
But like so chilled out and such a cool vibe that and a bit rough around the edges, but really obviously like amazing people. Like incredible people. Like
You can say bad things.
very warm and like I don't know, like it's hard to.
We just have less people. I don't think we're that nice. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you're right actually about that. You're not.
And we're close to the water.
Yeah.
Name one surfer that's fucking consistently aggro. You know.
There's not too many of them. Yeah, and not too many of them. Like Kiwis, actually, I don't think there's that many surfers compared to like Australia. It's not your national sport.
True.
So there's kids that I know that live on surf breaks that don't really surf. You know, and I'm like, whoa.
Sad.
Yeah, it is. It's like they're rugby players. You know, whatever else. But like, no, it's hard to, I guess, kind of sum up how I feel about Kiwis when I've been here for 13 years and I feel like I almost like am, you know, like there's a lot of behaviors and things that I've picked up being here that are very Kiwi, I'd say. But it's been really, really nice. And
kind of Uganda break though, eh? I'm just gonna push this button. Like I'm sensing there's a time for a change though, surely.
Where? Sorry, in
you.
Time for a change.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I'm actually
like
probably more settled than I've ever been. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I don't think it's time for a change at all. I think it's like as I sort of lean into going back to like leaning into who you are and understanding that and being proud of that. I'm doing that within the context of New Zealand and in a way that people make impressions like just like people came from Europe down to this little island and reinvented their lives, and there's things that you bring with you, right? So I'm bringing a style of like, I'm bringing my Ugandan American vibes to New Zealand and shedding and like spreading them all throughout the South Island. And it's like, that's just what it is, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just getting more comfortable with that. So if anything, I'm probably doubling down.
Okay, cool. Well, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm the spokesman.
Are we just starting now? Because that was a good intro, eh?
Yeah, that was just the intro. We're cutting all of it. It's too controversial, mate. Yeah. So, okay, I think, and then the website component, depending on how old you are, that you've been here long enough to do it like commercially. Because like New Zealand, without being too unkind, business is very hard. You know, people finish at 5. They go through the motions. Yeah, as long as you're not a dickhead, you're probably going to do all right. And if you're consistently putting in effort. So are you finding, because you're kind of like a fortune, like you came back in a time machine and you've got this fancy gizmo and we're like, what is it? Do you find with websites, it's like you're a little like, you can use that to your advantage?
Well, like, yeah, when I came here, I was 25 and I had 3 years.
You hide your age well. It's that good meat, mate.
Yeah, it was.
38.
Yeah. 39.
Ooh,
so yeah, it's getting on, but that was that was interesting actually. So like when I moved here, I had my first job was in software. I was like it was like a software consulting company, and I was actually in sales. I somehow got into that. And I was just like learning. I was like a sponge, and my boss it was a 30-person company, which is actually like a small business in America. And so it was like a lot of engineering. Like we're predominantly engineering and consulting and software consulting, and we would go up against like Accenture and IBM and these big powerhouse firms and build back-end solutions for companies, and do like niche projects. So all of that, like learning for I did that for like 2.5 years, trying to make an impression in that area. And my boss was like, he's really good in terms of letting me know that I wasn't really good at my job. And he's like a realist, he was like, you guys are all shit coming out of uni. You have like no skills, and I got to build you up. But if you could put up with the sort of the criticism and it was actually just tough love, because what he taught me was like applicable skill, and he taught me a lot about if you want to learn something, you got to get after it. Like I think universities sort of it can be a little of a brainwash tool. Like they tell you, they tell you all this stuff, and then you come out and you're like, wait a second,
I'm just
what
starting
do I know?
Again.
So that was really apparent when I got here, and I actually not only realized that my industry didn't really exist, like in terms of like I was like, where do I do that, you know? And it was like there is no place. Like it was probably in Australia at the time, like, you know, they would come over and maybe do these sorts of projects, I don't know, but I didn't find it. And then I was like, I wanted to do my own thing anyway. And so I sort of, you know, I worked at a pub, and I worked at a place called Tree Adventures out west, and
Tree Adventures.
yeah, like outdoor ropes course.
Road scores. What's
outdoor ropes course?
A ropes course.
Yeah, Tree Adventures is like
yeah.
They have like platforms, and you can like run from tree to tree and whatever else. And I was living in Piha. I lived in Piha for 3 years.
Wow, man.
So I was like surfing, and I kind of had the dream because I was building what I do now, like web design, and I was doing some graphic design out there. Taught myself videography. Like I was actually building applicable skill. But that's where, to answer your question long-winded about like, did you come here with like some technology that no one's ever seen before? It was like, no, because I had to learn.
It didn't exist.
Yeah, I had to learn it like everybody else. But I think what I did have was an understanding of like bigger picture strategy. And so like thinking about the way that I understood my industry and the way that I understood business was definitely, it was almost like I had a quarter of an MBA, because I was able to like connect business to like functionality and software and scalability and things that the web can do for businesses a lot easier. Like it was just natural. It was baked into my thing, because that was our process, right? You had to like figure out what those business problems were and then align a solution at like at a high, like a scale, like a large, you know, we're working with really like Nokia, Time Warner Cable, like big companies in America. So you really had to understand these complexities. And then, so all I needed to do was shrink that for like Joe the plumber and Bob the builder, and, you know, and the sort of jobs that you'd see at that like entry level web design. But then I realized that a lot of that stuff, it's still applicable when you shrink it down, but you can't over engineer the solution. So I still had to like use those learnings that I did, like YouTube University, to like design the website and then build the website or whatever it was that we were doing. So it was a cool like sort of way of having to pick up like applicable skill, like, you know, and do that in a place like Piha, where I could sit there and sort of learn, and, you know, and I had, you know, no money and all the time in the world, and was surfing anyway. So it was a really nice soft landing into the country. But then over time, you sort of combine it with what you knew and the strategy and everything else. And fast forward 13 years, and, you know, I've worked just about in every corner for large and small businesses in every industry. And I think I do have a really good sense of how to combine, you know, what I learned and what I know is essentially the secret sauce of what makes Dream Config, my business, what it is.
Yeah. So I've got in a few heated debates out of love with website designers, because it is, I haven't seen someone successfully scale it. You know,
a web company.
Yeah, like they design websites for companies and they do all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously do videography as well. It seems like a very hard thing to sell. You can sell it. Mm-hmm. It's just not an irresistible offer. You know, like, so you had these extremes, I think. Tell me if I'm wrong. You have the custom builds that people want and they pay a high dollar that funds your business until you get the next one. Mm-hmm. And then you got the website builder people where they just want to pay the bare minimum and they're annoying as fuck. Or they could just get a template and it's not very secure, but they don't really get that. And they're kind of in a tough situation. So how do you take on a salesperson to train them to sell a $16,000 thing to someone that you're like, hey, you might get results in 6 months to a year with SEO or whatever? Mm-hmm. Like, how are you approaching it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I never had the luxury of getting that far. I almost got to hire a salesperson, but I had my burnout before then.
Okay, good.
So yeah, we can get into that. But like, you know, it is hard to scale those businesses, and I have friends who do, like, I was the custom guy the scenario that you outlined, and then I have, you know, friends that are the more you know, cheap and cheerful, but not even cheap and cheerful, I guess, but just like, yeah, they're more commodity, right? Like they just build you what you want. And I was like trying to build to problems and solutions, and both have like a really painful journey to scale, because I came from a custom software background, so naturally I'm going to go into that world, and and then they probably came from more of a New Zealand area, which is like New Zealanders, I think, value a lot. It's 80% small business or something. So like most people just want that easy solution,
that no one goes through.
Yeah, but
I want to pay my
I don't want to do that for people, because that's not what interests me, So that's boring to me. So like it's kind of like you always end up where you should be, and I think that's sort of just how it played out. But scaling a custom software business is so difficult because, like you say, you're so invested project to project, and you're only as good as your last one. So like you got to get back on the horse and then like find the next problem. And so the sales cycle is quite long. And building a team of engineers was really difficult because they get poached by larger companies. And New Zealand doesn't have a endless supply of probably anything other than building and
rugby players.
Yeah, and you know what I mean? So like it's really challenging to find like that sort of technical talent that you need to at that level that you need to start, to get over a certain point. So we never got there. I've seen it in New Zealand, and I think I've seen it work well when there's an investment, like you get, someone's invested in, and then you can build that team around you from external capital.
What's the biggest you've seen? Like, you don't have to say their name if you don't want. Yeah. I haven't met them.
Yeah, they're around. But I don't think you would unless you investigate, because they seem to work on like and this is my sort of, I've met them, but I haven't like sussed out exactly how they, but I know that I know they've actually raised money to get to that point, or they've, but once you're at that point, like any business that sort of, I guess, capitalizes on that investment and succeeds is like, okay, cool. You find enough of that problem, or you find projects big enough and you can take it over. And so like I was trying to bootstrap my shit, and that was difficult, but like, yeah, I think the companies that I've seen do it well, they're like, well, I don't know, they've between 30 and 50 people, I guess. I don't know, like at the largest of maybe more like 30, max or something. But like you're definitely in that sort of realm, and that would be the largest I've seen in New Zealand. But they always seem to work on like a specific industries. Maybe there's like 4 clients, they're not really like extremely diversified. Like they solve a problem, but they do it at scale. Or maybe they have an overseas component where they work with companies in Australia. There's usually something like that. So that's kind of what I've seen, but it's extremely difficult.
Yeah, well, there's a story of Warren Buffett. I've been obsessing over this guy, Alex Hormozi. I don't know if you've seen him.
No, I haven't.
No one seems to know. I'm like, fuck, this guy's so good. He's a businessman, and he essentially he's like makes really profitable businesses. They don't necessarily have a whole lot of staff, but he just dominates and gets incredible incomes from it. Like, $80 million a year.
Wow.
When they just applies it to all businesses that he comes across, because now he buys businesses and flips them. So the story of Warren Buffett is he had a friend at school, you might have heard of it, that was exceptional, really smart, just as talented as Warren. And they just both chose different directions. And Warren Buffett obviously became very successful, and this guy didn't. And that was when Warren realized that, it's not just how hard you row, it's what boat you're in. And I worry about websites, people. Like, as I say, I like genuinely, I'm like, what's the plan, guys? You know what I mean? Like, you could have an okay income and be stressful for a while and work on these projects. You could go full niche, so the customization is more repeatable.
Yeah.
So what's the plan, man? How are we going to get you on a good boat?
Well, I like that question because it makes me think about what is my plan.
Why can't this be a strategy session?
Well, if I remember why I got into it and why I like it is because it's a fast-paced industry, and it's at the forefront of everything. Like everywhere someone like wants to be or whatever they're doing and working on has a tech, it's ingrained in that now, right? We're completely immersed by it, and I think to our detriment to an extent. But ultimately, I really like, there's certain aspects of that I really like. And what it means is that, you're always looking ahead at like what is next. And I think you could make the argument, there's one that comes to mind around like accounting, is like when Xero's software, when Xero came out, and I think a lot of people were like, what the fuck are accountants going to do now? Because that can do GST returns, it can do reconciliation. Like, what's the actual benefit of having an accountant if every small business can now do it themselves? And if you look at what happened was that they became advisors. And so accountants became less about compliance and more about strategic advisory. That's my understanding of it. And that's what my accountant does now. He's more of like a financial like advisor, and talking me through business outcomes and things. Okay, if you're trying to do this in the business, then this is what we need to do strategically with your finances. And then, I'll press this button and get your Xero return out to you tomorrow. And how that relates to websites is that, we have new platforms like Webflow and, these web-based solutions that are like really cost effective to build with. But the same rules apply in terms of how you leverage that tool to basically attract an audience, right? Or build a customer base or whatever the function is that you're trying to do. And you need design to do that. You need other components. You need copywriting. You need awareness on, I guess that's design. I was going to say UX, UI. But those different fundamentals that you need to make a website are still relevant. And those skill sets still need to be applied. And I think in a way that AI is slowly eating into the copywriting.
ChatGPT. I did a couple posts on LinkedIn, got the same engagement. I'm like, fuck you, I'm writing it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's all happening around us. But I guess that's where if you're looking ahead, you're constantly you're moving with it. And so what happened for us is we just got tighter on our niche, and I now live in Wanaka, which is interesting, and that's led to a lot of tourism work. So we do a lot of work with tourism, and that's like a lot of that has been digital strategy related. So like you've got these like, the tourism narrative is like, it's about regenerative tourism. That's the new thing. And it's like, okay, leave a place better than you found it. So when people come to our country, or you're traveling around the world, you need to think about, the community that you're in, and you need to pay respects to the land and be a good steward.
Don't shit in everywhere because there's no toilets in the vans.
Don't be, which is like obvious, right? It's like obvious stuff. But like the reality is that, we don't really think about it, and we don't think about the impact of over-tourism, and the way it leaves communities like,
Thailand, full moon party,
Great Barrier Reef.
Oh yeah, pH level.
You got so many different places that have been overrun, and some of those are also in New Zealand. And so you use aspects of technology to solve those problems. So like if you think about the Great Walks, you've got to book in to go on a Great Walk, and that they open a session. You have to book, and that window then it gets fully booked out, and it's usually like the first day they open it gets absolutely smashed, and the site goes down and everything else. But in terms of how you help a user or a visitor get to that point of booking, or the whatever experience that they're trying to within tourism, like whatever experience that they're trying to have, how you nurture them from becoming aware of that experience all the way through to like the conversion of that, which is probably going to be on a website booking different things like accommodation or whatever. But like ultimately there's so many touch points, right, on the internet. So it's less about just a single website build, and it's more about looking at that entire customer journey and how you need to leverage technology and things on digital platforms to make that experience really good. And I don't know if that helps answer your question.
No.
But that's like,
you'd be a good politician. Yeah, no, I get it.
It's like it's more about digital strategy and customer customer journeys. And
so there's one guy done it 8 years, and he has the exact problem. He tried to hire someone, trying to manage them was hard, trying to get them to a competent level. He was the business, so his reputation was how he got business. And he's like, I can't get past this ceiling. Mm-hmm. And then the other guy is incredible account manager, amazing service, manages people really well, but still, he thought he was going like the hosting level, so he builds his own servers and he gets a hosting thing, and he's going to go for like the $500 a month. and then he's also got the $16,000, $20,000, and if you're exactly doing what you're saying, like you just partner with contractors that inspire you and can surf in between it, fucking no worries, do that, bro. Like, who cares? Like, that's fun. Like, if that's your life. I just been thinking about the industry just for about a week and a half, just because the conversations got heated, and where I try to challenge them. I'm like, bro, like, because the things I'm good at is understanding sales and training people. A lot of things I'm not good at, those things I'm all right at. And I'm like, if I was your salesman, I'm going out to sell that on your behalf. I'm like, that's a nightmare. And then I go to the person, and Alex Hormozi uses value. He says value is the likelihood you'll achieve your outcome and the speed of which you achieve it. So you're providing a customized solution. Your social proof and portfolio is the indication of likelihood of success and their trust in you. But the time between success and you starting is predicated on the trust you can build with them that in 6 months something's going to happen. It's hard,
Long
man.
sales cycle.
Yeah.
Is another word. Yeah.
It's hard, man.
Yeah, well, he sounds American, eh?
Alex Hormozi.
Yeah. That's the bit. You know, there's a psyche, I think, also as well. Like, you know, I'm probably now going to go officially like rogue, but I think like
51 minutes. For the,
oh,
I
cool.
got time.
That's good. No, yeah, but like I just think about culturally, like right, like. You look at like Japanese culture and in the way that they, and I know very little about it, but it's like the way that you know, they look at work and the, you know, so like sitting on one task and becoming an expert at that thing, and like, you know, sharpening knives, like, you know what I mean, whatever it is, but like you're really good at sharpening knives, you know. And there's something like extremely awesome to me about just dedicating yourself to one thing and not having an expectation that it needs to go beyond you or beyond, you know, it needs to scale up to X amount of people, or you need to IPO. And, you know, so a lot of the rhetoric that comes around, you know, how quickly can you get to a point of success? How quickly, like the old me would have sort of bought into that narrative, but I think I'm not in a rush, you know, and I just came from a client, like I just met up with a client before, and we were talking, and he's a builder, and it was like, he's in the same boat, you know. Once you have a few battle scars and you've been through it, you know, you're like, well, you know, I could sort of cut my hair and try to look a certain way in the city. It goes back to the persona, you know. I could try to like emulate what I think people are going to want from a sales guy to be able to buy more and, you know, scale this thing quicker, or I could just be me and, you know, and make sure that the process is like, I don't know, someone said before, it was like the process over the product, you know. It was like, just make sure that you have a really, really fun and enjoy that time doing it.
Yeah.
But have like a really, like I've just been working on my process, you know, like, and that's been like, we're still building custom websites. We're still doing all the things that I used to do, but it's only the process that's really changed, you know what I mean? And that process has been being changed from years now of learning what I like about what's happening and what I don't like. So some of it's reactive to the environment and the way that we've changed as a society, and other stuff is just related to what's not efficient and what was being put pressure on because of like my ego or something else. And so it's like, there's no rush here. It's just purely about enjoying the ride and, you know, and making sure obviously you can support your family and make enough money to do the things that you want to do. And some of that takes, you know, a website a month for some people and in my industry. And sometimes it's 20 websites a month because they have a Porsche and they need, you know, it depends on so many other things. So for me personally, I think I am looking obviously to grow and scale. Well, not obvious, but I am. And so I'm thinking to answer that question about like, what do you do? Is I think the same thing. And I'm like, what am I doing? But it's to look into, I think I want to build a product. Like that's really the, and niche into something, you know, like I think it makes sense to like, to really double down into an area that you feel comfortable in. But I never pursued that. Every time I tried to pursue that, it sort of rejected me. And then since I've been in a place that actually really resonates with my own values and who I am and my personality, that niche is starting to like divulge itself.
Yeah, because I was talking to a guy that does social media management, and he got one big client by a fluke, but then it was all in one industry, and as soon as he uses their name, it just keeps getting all of them.
Yeah.
Because the challenge is, like, for example, the competing website guy goes out networking, so he just takes whatever the fuck comes at him. And then if you're getting referrals, that's one way. If you had a good acquisition model where you have like Facebook lead ads and it speaks to the particular client that you want, then you could probably do that. Because your model, like having contractors that are accountable to their own thing and they inspire you, I mean, I don't know of a better model for that business.
Yeah, well, it's just called like friends.
Friends, yeah.
Yeah,
hanging out with the brothers.
It's like professionals, you know? Like,
yeah.
I think you just you end up working with people. Like, it's the best case scenario, because a lot of people now, the way they want to work as well is they want to do a little bit of what they want to do. You know what I mean? Like, I had like there's one guy that I knew was like, I think he's maybe been on this podcast, but it was like all about return to work moms, and he's like, that's a great niche because they want part-time work. They're usually like extremely qualified in a certain area, and they have very strict parameters around what serves them and what doesn't, and they're no bullshit. They have X amount of time to get stuff done. And so it's like things like that is like, you know, that's part of the process, right? The outcome of whatever they're delivering hasn't changed, but it's like how they're delivering it is like they've picked up on something there. You know what I mean? And so I guess that's what we're ultimately saying. Well, we're talking about something different when you're like, okay, well, what are you going to do to scale? You know, I'm talking about building a product. That's like a different offering, right? But ultimately, I think my process within the service game, which I'm in now, you know, designing and building websites and the digital strategy, it's evolved as well, and it's just more about working with people that are experts in their own niches as well. You know,
yeah, what I mean? It makes sense to me. And then the same Alex Amosi, like I usually just obsess over one thing until I get it. So it's him at the moment. So for like 8 podcasts, I've just been talking about.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, yeah, I'll go deep on something that inspires me and beat it till it's no longer inspiring.
Yeah, same. Yeah. So he would basically, so he had something called Gym Launch, which was just an agency. And he started thinking, I could go all these different places, but why don't I just focus on gyms, because I started my own gym. And then he just realized, if I get them to spend more money on ads, I make more money because it's performance based, but they don't have much money. So I need to make them money really quickly. I also need to support their sales team, because if they sell more, they can spend more money on ads. I also got to help their retention, because if they're losing clients all the time, they can't pay more money for ad spends. So I can't make more money. Or they aren't good at acquiring staff. So, you know, we've got to help them with the process, and it all feeds the machine. And because it's just gyms and a particular type of gym where all his messaging warns off everyone except those people, because he essentially had 1,000 gyms. He found the ones that are the most profitable, asked them questions, found similarities, and then just focused on that. So high acquisition cost, but higher return. And because it was so customized, because it was so niche, the customization was very efficient and very fast. And because he wasn't selling to the broad audience, he could charge more. So I think, you know, with that model you've got, if you can attract that niche.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can only attract in web design when you have a niche, you know, like it's like to your point about, you know, if you're just taking work wherever it comes from, you don't get known for anything. So you never really, and what's the difference between your website as a builder and someone else who's building websites? So it becomes, you know, the niche is, I think, a natural sort of way to sort of narrow in on, you know, the type of work that you want to do. But I guess my big point that I'd hope to convey is like that niche you don't have to like try to find that niche per se, you know, and you don't have to like, there's no rush in finding that. Like looking back on my career, like, you know, like I think I was always like, man, like where's this custom software thing going to go and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, it's probably now less about that and like just allowing myself to like immersing myself in the experience, and the niche comes to me, you know what I mean? And that's more or less what's happening now. And that experience is like, yeah, I've moved locations. Like I still come to Auckland all the time, but I'm based somewhere else now, you know, and I'm based around the things that give me a lot of energy to do. Like we were talking about surfing before, and you can get a lot of surfing done actually in Wanaka because you just head down to Dunedin and it's awesome, you know, like it's just, if coming to the office for me and commuting from Piha into town, it was like a sign that, you know, I'm actually not living what my friend called the ideal day, you know, and a lot of people aren't living the ideal day because we're doing things that don't really make sense.
They conform, hate their jobs. Turn up Monday, like what the fuck? Like most people medicate away their existence with alcohol, coffee, me food.
I'm a bit of food too.
You surf more. I do less than 1,000 steps a day.
Okay,
that's what cooked me.
I
used to surf well, just longboard and fall off.
Well, could you walk to work? Because how far away are you?
Probably an hour's walk. But what I do every hour is I go for a walk now. Nice. It helps me be more efficient. And every time I go to the bathroom, I do exercises.
Nice. Well, we all technically do the exercise when we're in the bathroom, but
well, mine's heavy. I'm squatting like 112.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
Well, fuck. Yeah, just out of curiosity, like if you were to pick a niche, not that you will, and we're at an hour, so conscious of your time. If you just had to, gun against your head, you had to pick a niche just from most profitable and enjoyable, what one would you go?
Tourism.
I'm
a tourist. I realized that. That's what I was saying about just letting it happen. It was like, I was like, everything that I do in this country and the way that I live my life, even in California, this is actually a nice way to wrap up, is like bringing it full circle. Before I left to come here, I was jumping in. My buddy's mum had an SUV and we had these like small cars. Sorry, but
I was jumping in my buddy's mum.
My buddy's mum. Yeah, no, this isn't going to go to a weird place.
That's a good clip.
Yeah, I'm going to end like this. Yeah, so me and my buddy's mum.
Nice lady.
We would like take her car, which is still pretty bad, and fill it full of like firewood and then like, you know, pack it full of surfboards and just head south. And that was like, we were just traveling around California and it was called, there's a name for it, but it's basically freedom camping here. But there's a much different name in the States. It's quite funny. It's real serious sounding, but it's basically about freedom. No, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'll remember after this probably. But it was like, it's all about just the feeling you get when you're like on the New Zealand roadie and you're like, here we go. Like it's, you know, we're just on a mission, you know, we're on a mission. And a lot of people, I think Kiwis are really good at getting out there and going on missions, and it's sort of built into the DNA of most people with like the family holidays and the trips that you take and growing up and going to these rural places and these batches and that whole thing. So it's really suits me in the way that I, you know, what I get enjoyment out of, and then in visiting new places and experiencing, you know, different people and that sort of thing. So I think that's what I was doing before I came here. And then when I got here and I saw that you guys take a month off every year and you're willing to damage your P&Ls to do that and like shut down shop for like a month and just like, you know, just chill. Like I was like, okay, these guys definitely have their priorities straight. At first I didn't understand it because I was like, you got to get back to work. I'm American, you know. But I think that's sort of, I guess, you know, that is to me, that's that niche. You know what I mean? That's tourism. People who are coming to places to immerse themselves in different cultural and geographical experiences that like fill their cup, you know? So if I was like, holy shit, if I can actually do this for a living and help attract the right type of people to those places and work with, you know, government organizations to make these places better, or work with the businesses that attract, you know, that have those offerings and make those offerings better, then I'm pretty happy. So that's like, that's why I said tourism.
Okay. So we are finished, but I was just thinking of an idea that could be stupid that you might want.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Cause like, if you're going to go niche as fuck, like let's say you start a podcast called Tourism New Zealand, if it's not copyright, probably is. Or NZ something with tourism, and all you do is you invite your dream prospects on to interview them. You clip it up you can use AI. There's heaps of them. Opus, video.ai. I do it human.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, because it's not quite there, it's using ChatGPT to analyze the transcript, and you just drop in your YouTube link. Because a lot of people want content, you're a videographer.
Mm-hmm.
And then what that does is, like, say I called 50 agencies, which I did because I wanted to know marketing, and I was thinking about partnerships. Now I've already got a partnership, so now you're just shooting the shit with me. There's no reason.
Yeah.
So I call 50, 11 say yes. They meet, they listen to my podcast, they Google me, they're like primed, and they usually ask, what do you do? And then they're going to post it with all their network and share it with all the other tourism people. And then you take the top performing creative and a Facebook reel ad for a lead generation that leads to them coming on the podcast. And then you just keep the cycle of selling, or it could be an audit or some free offer or whatever. And so they're getting content that they can use to drive traffic to your website. That once you build it for them, they're going to be your best promoters. They might come back and forth. You know, sometimes sales cycles take longer. So hey, I would love to have you on the podcast again. And just an idea.
Yeah, well, you talked about sales being me scaling the business with people. Do you want a job, mate?
No, I need to be babysitted, brother.
Is this a weird podcast where it's like I'm supposed to hire you? Like, because that was pretty good. Like,
Thanks,
I like this. I'm glad it's recorded, because now I can go back and try to understand what the hell you just said, and then I can put it into the business.
Give it a whirl. Like, this is all I did. But the only reason, so just full transparency, I started a business and I was making content for people, but I want to make them money. Didn't know how, so I was like, I'll call a whole lot of agencies and they can do that part. So that's why I called you. I went through the list and you seemed nice. We shot the shit and I was like, oh, this guy's cool. And you do websites. I didn't Google much.
Yeah, that's all you need really in this world. Yeah. You didn't see me on that other list?
The website list?
Yeah.
No, but like,
list? Yeah.
it's worth considering, just because that's the whole game, is how do you get in front of someone? And,
totally.
And if they want to meet you, bonus. And they advertise for you. Yeah. And they're the avatar of your dream client. You think you get some head honcho, like I had fucking Pure SEO. I don't know if you know.
Richard Conway.
Yeah, he was on. So let's say they were my target audience and he's fucking talking shit on an ad. I'm like, well, they'll be like, well, who's this guy? And my face comes up and he shares it on social media. Who the fuck's this guy? Google.
Yeah, no, that's solid, mate. You're just giving these ideas away for free. It's like
candy.
candy.
To succeed, mate. It's a
hard
Friday. It's hard enough, brother. Yeah, it's Friday. I don't give a fuck. Yeah, cool. All right, brother.
Awesome, bro.
Thanks for coming on. Do you?
Thanks for
the
having
people,
me.
the tourism people, there might be some listening.
Yeah, there might be. If you're listening,
yeah, how do they find you and why should they find you?
dreamconfig.co. Send us a message through the contact form and let's have a yarn. No, but yeah, that's sort of, I mean, you can find people the way you found me, you know, but yeah, I think it's a cool time for tourism. So, I'm really passionate about where it's going and would love to help, businesses as well as, you know, we're in this, where there's some government space or a government niche that we're in, but yeah, that's obviously keen to help whoever's listening.
Cool. Well, if someone gives a fuck and is just focused on their thing for long enough, gives a fuck in the sense like you're passionate about tourism, and you've dedicated your craft, and there is a genuine need. If you've got traffic, like if you've got an audience, but you're not necessarily communicating your vision and you're not thinking too strategically with you, I do think there's a huge benefit. And like SEO, if you can get an established website and invest the time to get that right article. I was talking to that agency guy today. He's like, yeah, one article made him $200,000, but it didn't make him any money for 8 months.
Yeah, so, SEO is a huge component of that, right? Of the web in general, like it's massive. So yeah, definitely. And yeah, that's a good point.
So links in the description of your shit, your website stuff. Not shit. I'm not saying shit. I'm not
links in the description. Yeah, I know what you meant. If you're cool, hey, don't email me through the contact form if you don't understand that language. All right.
Yeah, you're not worth it. Yeah. You've qualified yourself out. Anyways, thanks for coming, bro.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Good.